Show me one hadith, show me a verse in the Quran, show me the verse before and the verse after, and say that to your readers, and let them decide for themselves.
Okay, Robert, real quick, and then we'll take our next call.
Well, here again, we have Mr. Zayed being dishonest and doing this bait and switch. I was speaking about his examples about Ferdinand and Isabella and so on, and he pretends that I was referring to his examples about Muhammad when I said we're talking about now he's just giving history instead of present examples. What he quoted about Muhammad was that Muhammad said, don't kill the Christians and Jews in the Islamic State. That's right, because they had to stay alive to pay taxes that would support the Islamic State. But that doesn't mean they had equality of rights. You notice he sidestepped your question entirely about whether Jews and Christians would enjoy equality of rights in the Islamic State. They don't. And the idea that the taxes that Muslims pay and that non-Muslims pay in the Islamic State are equivalent is false on the face of it, because all you have to do is look at the populations of the non-Muslims in the Islamic states and see how they steadily went down over history because they had to pay the non-Muslims had to pay these huge tax rates. All they had to do to get out from under the crushing burdens that they had in these taxes was to convert to Islam. And so this is what happened to those populations. And nowadays we have the same thing, that the problem with the rosy picture of Islam that Mr. Zayed is painting, and the idea that he's trying to claim that I am somehow misrepresenting Islam, is that Muslims all around the world are misunderstanding Islam the same way that I am. And Muslims all around the world are misapplying Islam and thinking that it has to do with warfare against Jews and Christians and subjugating Jews and Christians under the rule of Islamic law in exactly the same way that I am. And I don't know how they all got it so wrong and somehow misunderstood all these plain teachings that only I in my wickedness am misrepresenting. Really, Mr. Zayed's position is so palpably ridiculous, as is his book that purports to refute mine. My book, The Truth About Muhammad, is based on the earliest Islamic texts about Muhammad, the Prophet of Islam. And all that Mr. Zayed offers in his 400 pages of alleged refutation is the same kind of thing he's offering here. Diversion, deception, accusations, and finger-pointing, but no substance whatsoever.
Okay, thank you for that. We have to take our next call. You're live on Jihad Exposed. Welcome to the program.
Hello.
Hello, you're live. Who do we have on air?
Yes, my name is Rashid, and I'm a former Muslim. I can't say where I'm calling from just because of security reasons, but I was watching your show. I'm really surprised that the Imam Mustafa is quoting hadith, says, whoever hurts a dhimmi, I'm his adversary.
Are you still with us? Oh, we must have lost that call. We apologize for that. Please call us back, Rashid. Let's take our next call. You're live on ABN.
Hi. Good evening.
Good evening. Welcome.
Yeah, I just want to, I'm a Muslim myself. I'd like to, advise you when you conduct a meeting like this, you should have a clock in front of you. Give a chance to that both are in. It seems you're taking a side, that's obvious, but you got to be honest. Give it time for both sides. Look, the gentleman is talking about.
Sir, we're giving equal time for the people. We have a clock right there. Do you have a specific question for our panelists?
For you. Verse 929.
Yes.
That's a gentleman who is talking about. It says, "Qatilu alladhina la yadinu din al-haq." It said, fight with those who don't practice. They talk about the atheists in Mecca. This verses had a division. One for those atheists worshipping idols, and the second addressing the people of the book, which is a Christian and Jew, to pay tax. And if we see, we have to make some statements like, you see, the Prophet, be peace upon him, one of his wives was a Christian, another one was a Jewish. You see, in Islam, allowed us to eat your food, allowed us to marry your women. And they say God Almighty telling us in the Quran that's the closest near to us are those who claim they are follow of Jesus. Let's have some bridges, understanding each other. We condemn terrorism, we condemn killing innocent people. Let's have some dialogue and some bridging. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much for calling. I don't think Dr. Pipes or Robert were condemning Muslims. We're just trying to get to the bottom of what Islam teaches, from my understanding. They're not saying that Muslims support terrorism. I think even Robert said that there are Muslims out there that do publicly condemn terrorism. But again, it's Islam and it's not Muslims that we're trying to get to the bottom of. Let's take our next call here on Jihad Exposed.
Hello.
Hi, welcome.
It's me again, Rashid. As I said, I'm a former Muslim, and I can say where I'm calling from. And I heard Imam Mustafa saying that, quoting a hadith saying, whoever hurts a dhimmi, I'm his adversary, and I shall be an adversary to him on the day of resurrection. And he knows that's a hadith da'if. That's a weak hadith. It's not an authentic hadith. And he tried to ignore another hadith, which is in Sahih Muslim. It says, Muhammad is saying, لَأُخْرِجَنَّ الْيَهُودُ وَالنَّصَارَ مِنْ جَزِيرَةِ الْعَرَبِ حَتَّى لَا أَدَعَ إِلَّا مُسْلِمًا. Muhammad was saying that I will kick out Jews and Christians from the Arabic Peninsula, and I will not let only Muslims will be there. And he forgot to quote another hadith sahih saying, لا تبدأوا اليهود والنصارى بالسلام بعد لا تبدأوا اليهود والنصارى بالسلام وإذا وجدتم أحدهم في طريق فاضطروا إلى أضيافه. Don't start Christians and Jews with saying salam to them. And if you find whoever you find them in the street, you can push them to the narrow side. I'm trying to translate from the Arabic hadith. And he just using a weak hadith among other authentic hadiths and trying to ignore even their existence. He said also that Islam respects Christians and Jews, and that's really a joke because my father is an imam until now, and he raised me as to hate Jews and Christians. And he said they are kuffars, they are infidels, and we should wage war against them. And he used as an argument why we still have millions of Christians in the Middle East. And I will say to him, because they paid jizya, because they paid money to Muslims. How about the millions who were killed under the rule of Islam? How about millions killed in Morocco, Algeria, and Tunisia? The North African Church, whom the fathers were Tertullian and Augustine and others, they were erased from the map. And you go back, Mr. Mustafa, to Muqaddimat ibn Khaldun, and you can read about how Muslims killed Jews and Christians in those countries. So my argument here, Islam hates Jews and Christians. If we go to the biography of Muhammad, we will find that he killed the Jews, he killed Banu Qurayda, he killed the Christians, he kicked them out from the Arabic Peninsula, and he wanted them either to be Muslims or to be killed. They had no other options. And in other places, they pay jizya. He said jizya just a tax. No, sir, it's a war tax. You don't pay tax in America or in Europe and you feel subdued. You don't do that. It's a war tax. You pay a higher tax to the Muslims because you refuse their religion. It's just a way to stay in your religion.
Sorry to cut you off. We have to go on to our next call. I apologize for cutting you off. We're running a little short on time, and our phone lines are very busy. Abdullah, did you have any comments before we took the next call?
Yeah, look, I thank the caller for his call, and thank Daniel and Robert for the discussion thus far. I think that it's important to recognise that Robert, when I asked him to give an example of a specific law where non-Muslims are subjugated in an Islamic nation under Islamic law, he only quoted the jizya, which, as Mustafa correctly outlined, is just a tax. Muslims have the same tax. It's to a greater extent in monetary terms, and likewise Muslims don't get the benefit out of it of being protected. Now, this tax has to be returned if the Muslims can't protect the non-Muslims that are paying it. Now, to answer your question, Summer, you asked, well, if I live in America, America becomes an Islamic state, and I don't want to become Muslim, I don't want to pay the tax, do I get killed? No, you don't. You'll be free to leave. And in fact, this has been practiced in multiple times throughout Islamic history. The prime example would be Salah ad-Din. Robert also, he's saying he doesn't want to appeal to history, but he does appeal to history in some of his evidences. And one of the challenges that he put forward was that every time Muslims have given this relaxed interpretation, as he says, of the law, i.e., for example, allowing non-Muslims to leave an Islamic land once conquered, they were then rejected. Well, Was Salahuddin challenged? Was he rejected? Who was the chief physician to Salahuddin? It was Moses Maimonides, or as the Jews would know him, Rambam. Nobody rejected Salahuddin doing this. Nobody challenged him. Nobody challenged him when he let the Christians leave peacefully and not be attacked. So in reality, we've got this argument which is basically non-existent. I asked for one example. We weren't given an example. In fact, I could give examples of to the contrary of where non-Muslim nations do not present the equality, inverted commas, that Robert speaks about. Now, in the country that most of you are in at the moment, the United States, homosexual people are not allowed to get married. Is that equality? Is it equality that heterosexual people can get married and homosexual people can't? Now, in simple terms, it's normal for society to have slightly different rules for different interest groups, and to say that Muslims are unfair or unjust or unequal in their dealings with non-Muslims is just ridiculous.
Okay, Dr. Pipes, any response you have for Abdullah?
Yes, indeed. I was asked about supplying a surah of the Quran that shows that it's supremacist. But I think I've made it clear that I'm not a Quran specialist. I'm a historian. And my point was not to analyze the Quran, but to look at 1,400 years of history and to say that over 1,400 years, the driving force of Islam has almost everywhere at all times been to assert the superiority of Muslim over non-Muslim. I don't need a verse in the Quran. There are plenty of verses, but that's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about history. I am a historian. I'm talking about history. This is the basic history of Islam, to assert superiority over non-Muslims. Now, let's talk about what happens when non-Muslims are ruled by Muslims. You've asked, we've been talking about the jizya tax. And what I found fascinating is that Imam Mustafa acknowledges that were Islamic law to be applied in the United States, you, Summer, would be paying an additional tax. This is an extraordinary concession. In other words, you, as a non-Muslim, would have an onus that Muslims don't have. This is what stands in front of us should we have Islamic law. Imam Abdullah asked for other examples besides the jizya law, the jizya tax, which is not $100, which is a very, very substantial tax historically. There are many other sumptuary laws, humiliation. The entire life of the dhimmi, of the Christian Jew or Sabaean living under Muslim law, is one of humiliation, powerlessness, of being reminded on a daily, indeed an hourly basis that you are an inferior and that you should convert and that you are someone living at the tolerance of Islamic law, but you're inferior. And one symbol of this, one interesting one, is that Muslim men are allowed to marry non-Muslim women, but not the reverse. There's a kind of, again, this brings together the two things, Muslim over non-Muslim and male over female. It's a profoundly unequal system of living. Islam is profoundly unequal, comes out of a tribal background, is profoundly unequal. In the 12th century or the 15th century, all the other parts of the world were also unequal. But today, when we have achieved an equality, a liberalism, a democracy, a personal freedom, Islam or Islamic law is out of date, is retrograde. It's something that you and I would despair of going back to because we've left that. We've left these inequalities. We now have equality. And the idea that we should revert to a Shari system whereby Muslims have superiority over non-Muslims and males have superiority over females is profoundly unacceptable. And Islam needs to change. It needs to become modern. And what these two gentlemen are represent is the most retrograde kind of Islam that wants to pull us back into the medieval period, that's indeed engaged in religious attacks. No, that's not. I'm not talking about religion. I'm talking about history and politics and the way we live. And I'm fine with Islam, but it's got to be an Islam that's modern and that fits in, particularly as we're all four of us on this panel living in the West has to fit into Western ways of living. We've achieved something in the West. We don't want to give it up in order to go back to the Sharia.